Most traders enter the market with hope in their eyes and numbers in their head. They believe success will come from finding the perfect chart pattern, the flawless strategy, the secret indicator no one else has discovered. But year after year, account after account, reality delivers the same brutal truth: 95% of traders fail. And they don't fail because their charts were wrong. They don't fail because the indicators lied. They don't fail because they didn't study hard enough. They fail because of something far more powerful, something invisible, something living inside them every second of the day. They fail because of their own brain. It is one of the hardest truths to accept. The very organ that allows you to think, analyze, and plan is the same organ that betrays you in the heat of the market. You can spend years mastering candlesticks, memorizing Fibonacci levels, learning moving averages, and still find yourself pressing the wrong button at the wrong time. Why? Because trading is not primarily about charts. Trading is about psychology. Trading is about how your brain reacts under pressure, how it processes risk, how it handles uncertainty, how it lies to you when fear or greed take control. And this is not just theory. This is not just motivational talk about mindset. Neuroscience has proven it. Modern brain science shows exactly why traders lose discipline, why they chase, why they freeze, why they sabotage themselves over and over again. It shows us that the battlefield of trading is not on the screen, it is inside your skull. Every decision you make in the market passes through the filters of ancient survival circuits that evolved not to make you profitable, but to keep you alive. Those circuits are wired to avoid loss at any cost, to seek pleasure instantly, to react emotionally when threatened. They served our ancestors well when survival meant running from predators or finding food in the wild. But in the world of trading, those same instincts are poison. Imagine this. You enter a trade, and the position goes red almost immediately. Your brain does not interpret this as a number moving down on a screen. It interprets it as pain, as threat, as danger. The amygdala, the fear center of your brain, lights up like a fire alarm. Cortisol floods your bloodstream. Adrenaline kicks in, your body thinks you are being attacked, and so you do what any human would do under attack. You fight or you flee. Maybe you close the trade too soon just to escape the discomfort. Maybe you hold on to it, refusing to surrender, fighting with hope as your weapon. Both are emotional, both are reactive, both are driven not by logic but by biology. Now imagine the opposite. You enter a trade, and it goes green fast. That same brain floods you with dopamine, the neurotransmitter of reward. It feels euphoric, almost addictive. You want more. You add to the position recklessly, or you close it too soon to lock in that hit of pleasure. Either way, the brain has tricked you into acting for the chemical high instead of the long-term discipline. This is the hidden truth that few traders ever learn to face. Your brain is not built to make you a good trader. Your brain is built to make you survive the jungle. And the market is not a jungle, it is a mirror. Every impulsive click, every desperate hold, every reckless revenge trade comes not from ignorance but from neural wiring. You know what you should do. You know you should cut the loss. You know you should let the winner run. You know you should size small. But knowing is not the same as doing. The brain resists, it screams, it pulls you toward safety, toward comfort, toward the familiar. And so you repeat the same patterns, again and again, not because you lack knowledge, but because you are fighting a war against your own biology. This is why psychology is not an accessory to trading. It is not something you study after you master the charts. It is the core, the foundation, the very ground you stand on. Strategies can be copied. Systems can be borrowed. But discipline cannot be transferred. It must be built. It must be rewired. It must be trained into the brain itself until the neural pathways of fear and greed are overridden by new circuits of patience, awareness, and control. Neuroscience shows us that the brain is plastic. It can change, it can adapt, it can be rewired through practice and repetition. The same brain that betrays you today can be trained to obey tomorrow. The same circuits that scream for you to close a trade in panic can be rewired to stay calm, to follow rules, to resist impulses. But it does not happen by accident. It happens through deliberate training, through structured habits, through conscious rewiring of thought and action. That is what separates the 5% who win from the 95% who fail. It is not that the winners have secret charts. It is that they have mastered their brain. So as we begin this journey, understand this: your charts matter, but your brain matters more. Your strategy matters, but your psychology matters more. The market is not out to get you. The market is not even your enemy. The real battle is inside. And until you face that battle, until you learn to master your brain, every indicator, every pattern, every setup will collapse under the weight of your impulses. This is where your transformation begins. Not with a new system, not with a magic formula, but with a decision to face the truth. 95% fail not because they lack intelligence, not because they lack resources, but because they never learn to master themselves. If you can learn to do that, if you can learn to control your brain, your emotions, your wiring, you can step into the 5% who finally find freedom. The moment you open your trading platform and see the flashing numbers, your brain begins a battle it was never designed for. Those moving charts are not just lines and colors, they are signals interpreted by millions of years of evolutionary wiring. To the modern trader it looks like an opportunity or a threat, but to the ancient brain it feels like survival itself is on the line. And that is where most traders lose before they even place their first order. Because they think trading is about the market, but in reality it is about their own biology. The human brain is an extraordinary machine, but it was not built for Wall Street. It was shaped to help our ancestors hunt, gather, and avoid predators. Every reaction you have when trading, every spike of excitement, every wave of fear, every urge to chase a move or fight back against a loss, is the direct result of circuitry built for survival in the wild. The stock market, the Forex market, the crypto market, these are new environments. But your brain doesn't know that. It treats every fluctuation as a matter of life or death. That is why trading feels so intense, so addictive, so punishing. It's not the chart hurting you, it's your own brain misfiring in a world it doesn't understand. Inside your skull are two key players in this battle, the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. The prefrontal cortex, sitting behind your forehead, is the rational thinker. It is capable of long-term planning, logical analysis, and disciplined execution. When you write down a trading plan and decide to risk only 1% of your account per trade, this is the part of your brain in charge. It is the calm executive, the voice of reason. But deep inside lies the amygdala, a small almond-shaped structure whose job is simply detect danger and react fast. It doesn't care about probabilities, it doesn't care about strategies, it doesn't care about your trading rules. Its only mission is survival. When a trade suddenly goes against you, the amygdala screams for action. Get out now. Double down. Chase it back. Do something before it's too late. It hijacks the system, floods your body with adrenaline, and takes the wheel from the rational driver. That's why you can look back at your trades and think, why did I do that? I knew better. You did know better. But in that moment, the amygdala had control. This conflict is at the heart of trading. The rational brain wants you to follow your plan. The emotional brain wants you to relieve pain or chase pleasure. And the truth is, most traders never learn how to manage this internal war. They blame their lack of discipline, their strategy, even the market itself, when in reality they are fighting their own biology. Think about loss aversion. Neuroscience has shown that the brain feels the pain of losing about twice as strongly as it feels the joy of winning. To our ancestors, losing resources could mean death, so the brain evolved to react powerfully to loss. In trading, this backfires. You hesitate to close losing trades because the pain feels unbearable, so you let them run. At the same time, you grab small profits too early because the thought of losing them feels even worse. You end up cutting winners short and letting losers grow, not because you're careless, but because your brain is wired that way. The market exposes this flaw mercilessly. Now consider dopamine. This neurotransmitter is your brain's reward chemical. It spikes not only when you get a reward but also when you anticipate one. Every time you enter a trade, every time you see a green candle, every time you imagine what might happen if the trade goes your way, dopamine is firing. That's why trading feels so exciting, so addictive. It's not just about money. It's about chemistry. The same chemical that drives people to gamble, to crave sugar, or to scroll endlessly on their phones is what makes you overtrade. You don't need the money as much as your brain craves the thrill. That is why traders often keep trading even when they're losing. The anticipation of a win is enough to hook them. This is why the market feels like a casino. Casinos are masters of dopamine. They don't just reward players occasionally, they use uncertainty to maximize the effect. The brain actually releases more dopamine when rewards are unpredictable. Trading is the same. The randomness of outcomes keeps you engaged. Even when you're losing, your brain still craves the next roll of the dice, the next trade, the next chance. That is how traders spiral into overtrading, burning through accounts, chasing not profits but the chemical high of, maybe next time. Uncertainty is another enemy. The brain hates it. In fact, studies show that uncertainty activates the same circuits as physical pain. Think about that when you sit in front of the screen unsure of what will happen next. Your brain experiences it as if you're being hurt. That's why trading can feel exhausting, why anxiety builds after hours of watching charts. It's not weakness, it's wiring. The brain wants to predict and control. But the market is unpredictable and uncontrollable. This mismatch creates constant tension. Many traders exit trades too soon, not because the setup failed, but because they couldn't stand the discomfort of uncertainty. They wanted relief, and the only way to get it was to act. The rational brain and the emotional brain are like two people trying to drive the same car. The prefrontal cortex holds the wheel, carefully steering according to the plan. But the amygdala sits in the passenger seat, panicking, shouting, grabbing the wheel. When fear spikes, when greed surges, when dopamine tempts, the car swerves off course. And suddenly you're in a trade you didn't plan, or you've broken your rules, or you've risked too much. This isn't weakness. It's neuroscience. But here's the good news. The brain is not fixed. It can be trained. Through neuroplasticity, you can literally rewire your responses. Every time you journal your trades, every time you sit with a small controlled loss instead of fighting it, every time you practice patience, you are strengthening the prefrontal cortex's ability to stay in charge. Over time, new neural pathways form. Habits become automatic. The amygdala will still fire, but it won't control you the way it once did. This is why professional traders seem calm under pressure. They're not fearless robots. Their amygdala still reacts, but their prefrontal cortex is stronger, trained through repetition, journaling, exposure, and discipline. They have conditioned their brain to treat uncertainty not as a threat, but as part of the process. They've trained themselves to see losses not as pain, but as information. They've detached dopamine from random trades and attached satisfaction to following the plan. That rewiring is the real edge. So when you lose control and make impulsive trades, don't think of yourself as broken. Think of yourself as human. You are carrying a brain designed for survival in the wild, trying to function in a digital battlefield. The challenge is not to fight your brain but to train it, to build routines, habits, and mindsets that keep the rational driver at the wheel, even when the emotional passenger is screaming. Trading is not just numbers on a screen, it is biology in motion. Every win, every loss, every surge of greed or fear is a reflection of circuits firing inside your head. Master those circuits, and you master yourself. And once you master yourself, the market stops being a terrifying enemy or a seductive friend. It becomes what it always was, neutral, indifferent, a field where discipline, patience, and self-control are the only true weapons. Because in the end, the charts don't decide your fate, your brain does. And if you learn how to harness it, if you train it to stay calm in uncertainty, to resist dopamine's temptations, to overcome loss aversion, then you finally step into the arena with a fighting chance. The market won't change, but you can. And that's where every trading transformation begins. Not with a new indicator, not with a new strategy, but with the brain that decides how you use them. You sit in front of the screen, and the chart starts falling faster than you imagined possible. At first it's just a red candle, then another, then a cascade of selling so violent it feels like the floor has disappeared. You promised yourself you'd hold. You swore you'd follow your plan. But now your palms are sweating, your heart is racing, and every second feels like a hammer against your chest. And then, before you even realize what you're doing, you hit the sell button. You didn't plan it. You didn't think it through. You reacted. Later you'll regret it. Later you'll tell yourself you knew better, but in that moment your brain was no longer following logic. It was hijacked. This is emotional hijacking, the silent assassin of trading accounts. It's why you panic, sell at the bottom, why you FOMO, buy at the top, why you break rules you spent weeks designing in the heat of a single moment. It's not because you're weak. It's not because you're stupid. It's because your brain is running ancient survival programs that have nothing to do with markets. When the fight or flight system kicks in, the rational trader disappears, replaced by a frightened animal just trying to escape pain. The fight or flight response was never meant for candlestick charts. It was meant for tigers. When our ancestors heard a sudden rustle in the grass, the amygdala fired an alarm. Cortisol and adrenaline surged through the body, preparing them to fight or to run. Blood rushed to the muscles, heart rate spiked, vision narrowed. The system was brilliant for survival. It turned hesitation into action, confusion into speed. That reflex kept humans alive in a dangerous world. But the market is not a tiger. The red candle on your screen is not a predator. Yet your brain doesn't know the difference. It interprets financial loss as a threat to survival. When your account goes down, the amygdala screams danger, and the body reacts the same way it would if you were face to face with a beast. Cortisol floods the system, heightening stress. Adrenaline pushes you to act fast. Rational thought shuts down because in evolutionary terms, thinking too long about whether to run could mean death. So instead of calmly evaluating probabilities, you click sell in a panic, desperate for relief. The same mechanism fuels FOMO. When the market rips higher and you're not in the move, The brain reads it as lost opportunity, which to the survival system feels like lost resources. Back in the tribe, missing out on food or shelter could mean starvation. So when you see price racing away without you, dopamine surges with anticipation, adrenaline kicks in, and you jump aboard at the worst possible moment. You know the setup isn't there, you know the risk doesn't make sense, but the fear of being left behind overwhelms logic. The ancient brain wins again. This is why emotional hijacking is so devastating. It doesn't just nudge you, it takes control. Traders talk about discipline as if it's a choice, but in the heat of fight or flight, choice disappears. The rational prefrontal cortex is offline. What's left is raw instinct. You're no longer trading probabilities. You're trading survival. Look at history and you'll see the wreckage left by emotional hijacking. During market crashes, even legendary traders have lost everything because of panic. In 1929, when the Great Depression began, countless seasoned investors dumped positions at rock-bottom prices, unable to withstand the storm. They weren't following analysis, they were following fear. In more recent times, during the 2008 financial crisis, some hedge funds' leverage to the sky collapsed overnight because managers doubled down in desperation. They knew the risks, but the flood of cortisol and adrenaline pushed them to fight instead of retreat. Consider Jesse Livermore, one of the greatest traders of all time. He made and lost fortunes multiple times. What killed him wasn't lack of skill, it was emotion. In his final years, despite knowing more about markets than almost anyone alive, he over-leveraged, chased losses, and allowed panic to dictate decisions. He once said the market is never wrong, but often the trader is. And the reason the trader is wrong is almost always emotion. Every blow-up, every meltdown, every spectacular crash of a once great trader can be traced back to a moment of hijacking. A moment where fear screamed louder than reason, where greed drowned out patience, where biology won over strategy. These are not isolated accidents. They are the natural result of brains designed for survival trying to navigate markets designed for uncertainty. Think about how your body feels in those moments. The shallow breathing, the pounding heart, the urge to click anything just to end the pain. That is cortisol coursing through your blood. That is adrenaline narrowing your vision. That is the amygdala overriding your prefrontal cortex. You are literally less capable of rational thought in those moments because the brain has shifted resources away from logic and into reflex. To expect yourself to calmly trade through that without training is like expecting to stay relaxed while being chased by a predator. It's not realistic. And yet, this is the reality of trading. Every crash, every surge, every unexpected move has the potential to trigger fight or flight. Unless you prepare for it, unless you train for it, unless you understand that this is biology, not weakness, you will fall into the same trap over and over again. The market doesn't destroy traders. Their own emotions do. And emotions are not random. They are chemical, they are biological, they are predictable. Panic, selling, and FOMO, buying are not mysteries. They are the brain's survival code misapplied. Once you understand that, you can stop blaming yourself and start building systems to counteract it. You can learn to slow down your breathing when adrenaline spikes, to recognize the physical signs of cortisol before it hijacks you, to practice exposure to uncertainty so the amygdala doesn't see every dip as a threat. The great traders of history weren't fearless. They were trained. They built routines and rules not to outsmart the market but to outsmart their own biology. They knew that when panic arrives, the only defense is preparation. Because in the end, the market will always create fear and greed. But it's not the fear or the greed that ruins you. It's the hijacking. And if you can learn to stop handing the wheel to your emotional brain, you can finally start trading like the person you know you are, not the animal your biology tries to make you become. You think discipline is a choice, a simple decision to do the right thing. But neuroscience tells a deeper story. Discipline isn't just about character. It isn't about being stronger than everyone else. It's about the wiring inside your brain. Every moment you resist a bad trade, every time you follow your rules instead of your impulses, you are not just making a choice. You are firing neurons, strengthening connections, shaping the very architecture of your mind. Discipline is not willpower alone. Discipline is biology. Willpower itself lives in the prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain just behind your forehead. It's the seat of logic, planning, long-term thinking. When you decide not to chase that candle, when you pause instead of revenge trading, that's the prefrontal cortex doing its job. But here's the catch: the prefrontal cortex is like a muscle. It fatigues. The more decisions you force it to make without rest, the weaker it becomes. This is why after a long day of trading, you find yourself giving in to sloppy mistakes you'd never make in the morning. It's not that you became reckless. It's that the part of your brain responsible for willpower simply ran out of fuel. Meanwhile, lurking beneath is the habit system, neural pathways carved over years of repetition. Every time you break a rule and chase a setup, you reinforce that habit. The brain doesn't ask if it's profitable. The brain only asks, was this repeated? If yes, it wires the pathway deeper, making it easier to do next time. This is why bad habits in trading feel so hard to shake. It's not about weakness. It's about circuitry. Your neurons have been trained to fire in a certain sequence, and once that wiring is laid, the brain prefers to follow the familiar route rather than carve a new one. But the beauty of neuroscience is this: the brain is plastic. It changes. Neuroplasticity means that no matter how many bad trading habits you've built, you can rewire them. It doesn't happen in a day, but with repetition, the brain will reshape itself. The same way you once unconsciously hit buy in a panic, you can train yourself to pause, to breathe, to follow a checklist instead. Over time, the pause becomes the habit. The routine becomes automatic. The brain lays down new tracks, and discipline shifts from something you fight for to something that feels natural. Think about brushing your teeth. You don't debate it. You don't wrestle with yourself every morning. It's automatic. That's what routines can do in trading. When you build a ritual before you trade, journaling, reviewing rules, visualizing setups, you are priming neural circuits. You are telling your brain, this is the pathway we follow. The more consistent the routine, the stronger the wiring becomes. What once required effort becomes effortless. What once felt like discipline now feels like identity. Science shows that habits form through a loop: cue, routine, reward. The cue might be sitting down at your trading desk. The routine could be reviewing your plan. The reward might be the sense of calm and clarity that follows. Repeat that loop enough times and the brain automates it. That's why some traders seem unshakably disciplined. It's not that they're superheroes. It's that they've trained their brains so deeply that breaking discipline would feel unnatural to them. Now, let's zoom into the chemistry of discipline. Dopamine, often called the pleasure chemical, isn't really about pleasure. It's about anticipation. It drives you toward whatever the brain believes is rewarding. If your brain associates excitement with gambling trades, dopamine will pull you into reckless setups. But if you train your brain to link satisfaction with following your process, dopamine starts working for you instead of against you. Suddenly, you feel a hit of satisfaction not from breaking rules, but from keeping them. That's neuroplasticity at work, the rewiring of your reward system. The military has long understood this science. Soldiers don't rely on willpower in chaos. They rely on drills, routines repeated until the brain can't forget. When fear spikes, the body defaults to training. Trading is the same. If you expect to be disciplined in chaos without training, you are asking the impossible. But if you drill routines, from stop-loss placement to trade journaling, discipline emerges not from willpower but from habit. It becomes the brain's default mode. Neuroimaging studies show that when you repeat a behavior, neurons fire together. Over time, neurons that fire together wire together. Synapses strengthen. Myelin, a fatty sheath around neural pathways, thickens, making the signal faster and stronger. This is why professional traders who journal daily, review trades nightly, and stick to routines seem to operate with mechanical calm. Their brains have been rewired for discipline. They don't resist temptation through effort. They rarely feel the temptation in the same way anymore, because the circuits for impulsive trading have weakened, while the circuits for discipline have strengthened. But here's where most traders fail. They think discipline is about grand gestures, one big effort to transform themselves. Neuroscience shows it doesn't work that way. Change happens in small, repeated actions. Skipping one reckless trade, writing down one mistake, reviewing one chart with patience. Each act lays another thread of wiring. Over weeks, those threads braid into ropes. Over months, those ropes become highways in the brain. And then discipline, once fragile and forced, becomes permanent and natural. Consider a trader who wakes every morning and follows a strict routine: exercise, meditation, journaling, then charts. At first it feels like work, but after 60 days the neural pathways are laid. After 90 days the routine feels automatic. After 180 days it's not just a routine, it's who they are. This is identity-level discipline. They no longer say, I try to be disciplined. They say, I am disciplined. The brain has been rewired. This is why routines are sacred for profitable traders. The ritual itself isn't magic. The magic is what it does to the brain. Every morning routine, every evening review, every checklist ticked is a stroke of the sculptor's chisel, carving the mind into a disciplined machine. Without routines, the brain defaults to chaos. With routines, it defaults to order. Now imagine applying this to the moments that matter most: when fear spikes, when greed tempts, When cortisol floods your system, if you've built strong neural pathways for discipline, the brain defaults to them under stress. Instead of panic, selling, your fingers move to the checklist. Instead of chasing, your brain remembers wait for confirmation. This is discipline at the neural level. It's not heroic. It's wiring. And here's the most liberating truth: anyone can build it. Neuroplasticity doesn't care how many times you failed before. The brain never stops rewiring. Studies show even in old age, new habits can form, new circuits can be laid. Every disciplined trader you admire was once impulsive. The difference is they understood discipline not as a moral strength but as a neural practice. They rewired themselves. So the next time you think discipline is about trying harder, remember this: trying harder is not enough. You don't fight biology with force. You reshape it with repetition. You carve new pathways. You wire discipline into your identity until it becomes second nature. That is how the brain works. That is how profitable traders are built. Because discipline isn't willpower in the moment. Discipline is preparation in the months before. Discipline is the wiring you lay day after day, choice after choice, until the brain has no option but to follow the tracks you've built. In the end, discipline is not about what you do once. It's about what you repeat until your brain itself changes. And when that happens, trading stops being a battle with yourself. It becomes a flow, a rhythm, a state of calm execution where every action aligns with who you have trained yourself to be. That is the neuroscience of discipline. That is how habits, routines, and neuroplasticity transform ordinary traders into extraordinary ones. And that is why the greatest edge in markets is not found on a chart, it's found inside your brain. You sit down to trade, staring at the chart, and in that moment you believe you are rational. You believe you are calculating risk, measuring probabilities, thinking clearly. But neuroscience tells a harsher truth. Your brain is not built for markets. Your brain evolved in the wild, shaped by survival, wired to avoid pain and chase reward, designed for short-term survival, not long-term probability. And when you put that ancient wiring into the arena of modern trading, it misfires. It distorts, it tricks you, and it makes you lose. Let's start with probability. You tell yourself the setup has a 70% chance of success. You've read the stats, back-tested the system, maybe even journaled it. But the brain doesn't experience 70%. The brain experiences emotion. One loss feels bigger than the math says it is. One win feels more intoxicating than it should. Your neural circuits are not calculating like a computer. They are interpreting through fear and desire. This is why traders constantly deviate from their own systems. The system might be sound, but the brain doesn't live in numbers. It lives in feelings. The science is clear. Humans are terrible at estimating probability. We overestimate rare dramatic events and underestimate steady, consistent outcomes. In trading, that means the big spike, the sudden crash, the dramatic breakout grabs our attention and our money. We fear it too much or chase it too hard. Meanwhile, the slow grind, the small consistent setups, the ones that actually make money over time, feel boring, invisible, unworthy of risk. The brain craves drama. The market rewards discipline. That gap is where accounts are destroyed. Loss aversion is the perfect example. Neuroscience shows that the pain of a loss is processed in the amygdala, the brain's fear center, and it registers at nearly double the intensity of a gain. In simple terms, losing 100 feels twice as painful as winning 100 feels good. That imbalance is why traders cut winners too early and hold losers too long. The brain cannot stand the sting of locking in a loss, so it delays, hoping the chart will turn. At the same time, the brain grabs at profits too quickly, afraid they might slip away. The result: small wins, massive losses. And all of it explained not by strategy but by circuitry. But here's where it gets worse. The brain doesn't just fear loss. It gets addicted to reward. Every time you win, your brain releases dopamine, the neurotransmitter of anticipation and reward. That dopamine spike feels intoxicating. It makes you feel alive, certain, powerful. But dopamine doesn't just reward the win. It wires in the behavior that preceded it. If you broke your rules and still got lucky, dopamine reinforces the bad behavior. The brain says, "Do that again?" And suddenly recklessness is rewarded, the pathway deepens, and you find yourself repeating the same destructive trades again and again. This is why overtrading happens. It's not about needing more money. It's about needing more dopamine. The brain doesn't crave profit. It craves the chemical rush. That's why you sit glued to the screen, taking setups you know are garbage, burning through your account, and then wondering why you couldn't stop. It wasn't logic failing. It was biology hijacking. Neuroscience studies show that dopamine spikes more in anticipation than in the reward itself. This is why traders often feel more excitement entering a trade than closing it. The entry is the high. The potential is intoxicating. The reality is less thrilling. So the brain seeks the next entry, and the next, and the next. It's not trading anymore, it's chasing a chemical. Now picture this in a crash. Cortisol floods the system, adrenaline spikes, the fight or flight response kicks in. The rational prefrontal cortex shuts down. The amygdala takes over. In milliseconds, your brain is no longer calculating. It is surviving. That's why traders panic, sell bottoms, chase top, freeze when they should act. The brain is reverting to its primal wiring, designed for tigers in the jungle, not candlesticks on a screen. But the body doesn't know the difference. Stress is stress. Threat is threat. And in that moment, your portfolio is not numbers. It is life or death in your nervous system. So what do? You can't rewire millions of years of evolution overnight, but you can build systems that protect you from your own brain. Practical risk management is not about protecting capital alone. It is about protecting you from you. Start with the 1% rule. Never risk more than 1% of your account on a single trade. This isn't just financial, it's psychological. The brain can handle small pain. A 1% loss doesn't trigger the amygdala meltdown, but a 5% hit, that wakes up survival mode. Keep risk small enough and the brain stays calm enough to think. Next, automate what you can. Play stops as soon as you enter. Don't rely on willpower in the heat of the moment. Willpower is weak under adrenaline. Systems are strong. Automation bypasses the emotional brain by removing the decision in the first place. Then, track your dopamine. Notice when you are trading for the thrill, not the edge. If you feel euphoric before entry, pause. That's not discipline. That's chemistry. Build rules that limit the number of trades per day. Cut yourself off from the dopamine loop. Force the brain to settle. Another weapon is reframing. Loss aversion destroys traders because the brain equates loss with failure. But what if loss is seen as data? A trader who journals every loss, extracts lessons and reframes it as tuition for growth rewires the emotional meaning. The amygdala stops screaming danger, and the prefrontal cortex takes back control. Loss becomes feedback, not trauma. Finally, routines anchor the brain. Start your day with a review. End it with a debrief. Build rituals before you trade, breathing exercises, affirmations, visualization. These are not fluff, they are neural cues, training the brain to enter a state of calm execution instead of frantic chasing. The brain loves patterns. Give it a ritual, and it learns to associate that ritual with discipline. Understand this, the market is not your enemy. Your brain is not your enemy. Your brain is simply wired for a world that no longer exists. But through awareness, through rules, through repetition, you can bridge the gap. You can protect yourself from probability distortions, from loss aversion, from dopamine addiction. You can rewire yourself into a trader who doesn't just survive, but thrives. Because in the end, trading is not about beating the market. It is about mastering your own biology. Every chart is a mirror, reflecting the ancient circuitry inside your skull. Every trade is a battle between your prefrontal cortex and your amygdala, between dopamine and discipline, between the brain that evolved for survival and the brain you must now train for success. When you understand that, risk management stops being boring. It stops being a chore. It becomes your shield, your weapon, your path to freedom. The edge you seek is not just in the charts. It is in the wiring of your own mind. And when you align risk and reward with the science of your brain, you stop being prey to your instincts and start being the architect of your future. That is the neuroscience of risk. That is how you stop miscalculating probability, how you silence loss aversion, how you break free of dopamine's chains. That is how you trade with discipline, not just for a day, but for a lifetime. You believe you see the market clearly. You believe the chart in front of you is objective reality, a neutral canvas of price and time. But neuroscience whispers another truth: your brain is not a camera recording the world as it is. Your brain is an interpreter, a storyteller, a machine built on shortcuts. And those shortcuts, the same ones that helped our ancestors survive in a dangerous world, now distort your trading. They bend your perception, they color your judgment. They trap you in illusions that feel like truth. These illusions have a name: cognitive biases. And if you don't understand them, they will quietly bleed your account until nothing is left. Take anchoring bias. Imagine a stock trading at 100. You watch it climb to 120, then fall back to 110. Somewhere in your mind, that 120 becomes an anchor. You believe the stock is cheap now, simply because you compared it to the higher price. But the market doesn't care about your anchor. It doesn't remember 120. It only lives in the present. Yet your brain clings to that reference point as if it were carved in stone. Neuroscience shows why when we encounter a number, the brain's estimation circuits lock onto it. Even irrelevant numbers shape our decisions. In one famous study, participants spun a random wheel of fortune before answering questions. If the wheel landed on a higher number, Their estimates for unrelated questions were higher too. Anchoring happens instantly, unconsciously, and it drags your trading decisions with it. Confirmation bias is just as deadly. Once you have a belief about a setup, your brain hunts for evidence that proves you right. You see the bullish candle, the trend line break, the volume spike, and you nod yes, my thesis is correct. But you ignore the divergence, the weakening momentum, the macro context screaming the opposite. The brain is not searching for truth, it is searching for comfort. Functional MRI scans show that when people encounter evidence confirming their beliefs, the reward centers of the brain light up with dopamine. It literally feels good to be right, and when evidence contradicts us, the brain reacts with discomfort, even pain. Traders don't avoid opposing evidence because they're blind. They avoid it because their biology makes it feel unpleasant. So they filter it out, and they double down on a bad thesis until the market punishes them into reality. Then comes hindsight bias, the cruel trickster of memory. After the chart moves, you look back and say, of course it broke down there. The signs were obvious. I knew it. But you didn't know. You only think you knew because the brain rewrites memory to fit the outcome. Neuroscientists have proven this through experiments where participants make predictions, then later swear they always knew. The result, even when their original answers show otherwise. This is why journaling is so important. Without written records, your brain will deceive you into believing you had foresight you never actually had. And that illusion keeps you from learning. You don't improve if you think you were right all along. These biases aren't moral failings. They're brain shortcuts. Evolution built them to save time, to keep us alive when hesitation meant death. Anchoring helped our ancestors judge quickly whether food was scarce or plentiful. Confirmation bias helped tribes stick together by reinforcing shared beliefs. Hindsight bias gave us the illusion of predictability in a chaotic world, reducing anxiety so we could keep moving forward. But what kept us alive in the wild now kills us in the market. The same shortcuts that once protected us now lead us into ruin. Neuroscience experiments reveal how stubborn these biases are. In one study, subjects asked to estimate probabilities after being shown irrelevant numbers still couldn't escape the anchor. In another, people were given evidence both for and against their political beliefs. Instead of balancing their view, the brain's reward centers lit up when they found confirming evidence, while the threat centers activated at opposing views. The brain literally defended its beliefs as if they were territory under attack. And in studies of hindsight bias, participants asked to recall their original predictions consistently misremembered them, convinced their guesses were closer to the outcome than they actually were. The brain edits memory without permission, rewriting history to protect the ego. So what chance does a trader have? If these biases are hardwired, can you ever escape them? The answer is not to escape, but to manage. You don't erase cognitive bias, you build tools to counteract it. Start with awareness. Know that every number you see can become an anchor. When you spot yourself saying, it was just 120, so 110 must be cheap, pause. Ask, if I had never seen the higher price, would I still want this trade? Strip away the anchor and force your brain to evaluate the present reality. For confirmation bias, the antidote is deliberate opposition. Build a habit of arguing against yourself before every trade. Write down not just why you think the setup will work, but why it might fail. Train your brain to seek disconfirming evidence. The act itself rewires neural pathways, making it more natural over time to look at both sides. Some of the greatest hedge funds in history use this practice. They assign team members to be devil's advocates, forcing alternative perspectives into the decision process. You can do the same in your own trading journal. To fight hindsight bias, documentation is everything. Journal every trade, every thesis, every prediction before the outcome. When the trade ends, go back and compare your memory with your writing. You'll be shocked at how often your brain rewrites the story. Over time, this practice humbles you. It forces you to see where you were actually right and where you were rationalizing. The brain loses its grip on the illusion when faced with hard evidence. Another powerful tool is probabilistic thinking. Instead of clinging to certainty, this trade will win, train your brain to think in probabilities. Say, this setup has a 60% chance of working, a 40% chance of failing. This simple reframing keeps the brain from locking onto a single outcome and helps weaken the grip of biases. Neuroscience shows that when people practice probabilistic language, their brain's error detection circuits activate more strongly, making them better at noticing when reality diverges from expectations. Mindfulness also helps. When you slow down, breathe, and watch your thoughts, you start noticing the bias in real time. You catch yourself anchoring. You see the rush of dopamine when confirmation appears. You feel the urge to rewrite memory in hindsight. Mindfulness doesn't erase the bias, but it creates a gap between impulse and action. In that gap, discipline can live. Above all, accept this truth: you will never eliminate bias completely. You are human. Your brain is wired for shortcuts, but you can build systems that keep those shortcuts from destroying you. You can journal, review, seek opposition, set rules, and automate decisions. You can create a structure strong enough to protect yourself from the tricks of your own mind. Because in the end, the battle of trading is not against the market. It is against the biases that live in your head. Anchoring will whisper false reference points. Confirmation will blind you to danger. Hindsight will convince you that you knew it all along. But if you know the science, if you build the tools, you can pierce the illusion. You can see the market as it is, not as your brain wants it to be. And that is where the edge lies. Not in a secret indicator, not in a perfect strategy, but in mastering the biases of your own biology. The trader who sees reality more clearly, even slightly more clearly than the rest, has the only real advantage that matters. So remember this: every chart is not just a pattern of price. It is a battlefield of perception. Every decision is filtered through biases. But with awareness, with discipline, with science as your guide, you can step out of the fog. You can trade not with the illusions of the brain, but with the clarity of truth. And that clarity is the greatest weapon any trader can carry into the market. There is a rare and almost mystical state that traders speak of in hushed tones, as if it were the holy grail of performance. They call it being in the zone, a condition where every click of the mouse feels effortless, where decisions are made without hesitation, where the noise of the market fades and clarity takes over. It is not luck, it is not instinct, and it is not chance. Neuroscience has given this experience a name: flow state. And once you understand what flow really is, you begin to see why the greatest traders in history describe their best days not in terms of how much money they made, but in how deeply they were able to access this mysterious state of mind. Flow is not just concentration. It is a complete merging of the trader with the task, a dissolving of the boundary between self and market, a state where time distorts and every action flows naturally into the next. Psychologists describe it as optimal experience, but traders describe it as survival. Because in the markets, one moment of hesitation, one flash of doubt, one unnecessary distraction can cost a fortune. The brain in flow shifts into an extraordinary mode of functioning. The prefrontal cortex, the seat of our overthinking and self-doubt, temporarily quiets down. Neuroscientists call this transient hypofrontality. In this silence, the chatter of worry, the noise of fear, the paralysis of analysis all fade away. What remains is pure presence, a deep connection between the brain's reward pathways, attention networks, and motor control. The result is decision making without friction. You are no longer asking yourself, should I take this trade? You are simply taking it, aligned with your rules, your preparation, your edge. This is why traders who enter flow often describe it as effortless discipline. The actions feel automatic, but they are not careless. They are the result of thousands of hours of preparation crystallizing into a single, fluid performance. Think of elite athletes: Michael Jordan, Tiger Woods, Serena Williams. Each describes their peak performances as though they were watching themselves play, detached yet fully immersed. Traders are no different. Jesse Livermore once wrote that his greatest trades felt strangely calm, as though he was not forcing anything, but simply allowing the market to reveal itself. Paul Tudor Jones has described the rhythm of trading days where he felt in tune with the market, not fighting it but flowing with it. Neuroscience tells us wide in flow, the brain releases a cocktail of neurochemicals, dopamine, norepinephrine, endorphins, and anandamide, that sharpen focus, increase pattern recognition, and create a deep sense of enjoyment. The trader in flow is not fighting the market, he is dancing with it. He sees patterns before they form fully, feels risk before it materializes, reacts faster than conscious thought would allow, and perhaps most importantly, he is not consumed by fear or greed. But here lies the paradox: you cannot chase flow. The harder you try to force yourself into the zone, the more elusive it becomes. Flow arises when challenge meets skill. Too little challenge and you are bored. Too much challenge and you are anxious. Flow exists in that razor's edge where the difficulty of the market matches your capacity to respond. For the unprepared trader, this balance never comes. But for the disciplined trader, who journals, who studies, who practices patience, who understands risk, flow becomes a frequent companion. And when it does, performance soars. This is why preparation is not boring. It is the price of admission to the zone. Consider the brain science behind this. The anterior cingulate cortex, a region involved in error detection, becomes hyperactive in flow, constantly scanning for patterns and anomalies. the striatum responsible for habit loops, delivers smooth execution of trained responses, and the reward system, through dopamine release, reinforces every correct action, making the process itself deeply enjoyable. You don't just want to trade, you love it in that moment, not because of money, but because the brain is firing at its highest potential. This is why traders who achieve flow describe it as addictive, not in the destructive sense of gambling, but in the sense of fulfillment, like an artist lost in painting or a musician lost in music. So how does a trader step into flow more consistently? It begins with environment. Flow requires focus, and focus requires the removal of distractions. A cluttered desk, a buzzing phone, a dozen open tabs, these are enemies of flow. Neuroscience shows that every time you switch attention, your brain incurs a cost, a residue of distraction that lingers. To enter flow, you must create conditions of deep work, a clean environment, a set routine, a ritual that tells your brain it is time to perform. For some traders, this means meditation before the market opens, calming the mind and slowing the heart rate. For others, it is reviewing the journal, aligning with rules, priming the brain for discipline. The specifics do not matter as much as the consistency. Rituals signal safety, and safety allows the brain to relax into focus. Next comes challenge. Flow does not arise from mindless actions. If your trading is mechanical to the point of boredom, your brain drifts. If your trading is chaotic to the point of terror, your brain panics. Flow exists when the challenge stretches you, but does not overwhelm you. This is why journaling progress is so vital. It helps you find that balance. Perhaps you increase size only when consistency proves readiness. Perhaps you introduce new strategies only once old ones are mastered. Each step keeps you at the edge of growth, where flow lives. Another key factor is feedback. The brain in flow thrives on immediate, clear feedback. This is why video gamers can lose themselves for hours. They are constantly receiving scores, progress, signals of success. In trading, feedback comes from the market, but you must learn to interpret it wisely. A winning trade is not necessarily correct, and a losing trade is not necessarily wrong. Flow requires that your feedback loop is based not only on profit and loss, but on whether you executed your process correctly. Did you follow your risk rules? Did you cut losses? Did you stick to your plan? If yes, then the feedback is positive, regardless of outcome. This shift retrains the brain to reward discipline rather than dopamine chasing wins. Meditation deserves special mention. Neuroscience shows that mindfulness training thickens the prefrontal cortex and reduces amygdala reactivity. In other words, it strengthens rational control and weakens fear impulses. Traders who meditate regularly report entering flow states more easily, because their minds are already trained to notice distractions and let them go. Just 10 minutes of breath focus before the market opens can create a profound shift. You are not eliminating fear, but learning to watch it without being ruled by it. This detachment is essential for flow. Consider also the role of sleep in recovery. Flow is not a switch you turn on in a tired brain. The neurochemicals of flow require energy, balance, and restoration. Sleep deprivation shrinks prefrontal activity and spikes cortisol, dragging you away from the zone and into reactive trading. Nutrition and exercise also matter. Aerobic activity increases brain-derived neurotrophic factor, a protein that enhances neuroplasticity and primes the brain for learning and focus. Many traders dismiss these as irrelevant, but neuroscience proves they are foundational. The mind cannot flow if the body is broken. Examples abound of traders who mastered flow. Consider the legendary stories of day traders who sat motionless for hours, waiting, patient, almost meditative, then suddenly acted with precision, executing in seconds and capturing massive moves. They were not guessing. They were in flow, attuned to the rhythm of the market, their preparation converging with opportunity. Another story tells of a futures trader during the crash of 1987 who remained calm, while colleagues panicked, because he had rehearsed every scenario in his mind. When chaos arrived, he entered flow. He was ready, his brain already patterned for that exact storm. And he survived, even thrived, while others were destroyed. The secret that neuroscience reveals is that flow is not mystical. It is biological. It is a state the brain is designed to enter when conditions are right. But like all things in trading, it requires discipline. You must train yourself, shape your environment, refine your habits, align challenge with skill, and protect your body and mind. Then, and only then, does flow come. And when it does, it transforms everything. Trading stops being a battle of willpower and becomes an act of artistry. You stop fighting the market and begin to dance with it. Time dissolves, fear disappears, doubt evaporates. You are there present, performing at your absolute peak. This is the peak trading performance that all aspire to, not endless profit, but effortless mastery. And here lies the final truth: money is the byproduct, not the goal. Flow does not guarantee wins, but it guarantees excellence of process. And over time, in trading, process is profit. When you live in flow, even the losses are teachers, even the mistakes are part of the rhythm, even the uncertainty feels like music. The brain in flow is not afraid of what comes next, because it is too busy living fully in the now. And that is the gift of flow, not just better trading, but a better mind, a better life. For if you can learn to enter flow at the screen, you can learn to enter flow in everything: relationships, work, creativity, even the simple joy of living. The market, then, is not just a place to make money, but a place to practice the art of being fully alive. Patience is the rarest currency in trading. Everyone knows it is essential, yet almost no one possesses it. The market teases, it tempts, it whispers promises of quick wealth. Screens glow with movement, candles rise and fall, charts pulse with opportunity, and the brain screams, act now or lose your chance. This is not weakness of character, it is neuroscience. The human brain is hardwired to favor immediate rewards over distant ones, a bias that has served us for survival across thousands of years, but now works against us in the world of modern markets. Waiting feels like pain, and instant action feels like relief. But in trading, this reflex is poison. The very instinct to leap at the first sign of movement is the instinct that empties accounts. Neuroscience shows us why waiting is so difficult. The prefrontal cortex, the rational center of the brain, is responsible for weighing long-term consequences, for saying, not yet, when the impulse cries, now. But the prefrontal cortex is weak compared to the limbic system, the emotional machinery powered by dopamine and craving. When you see a stock surge or a currency spike, dopamine surges as well, priming you for action. Your ancient brain, designed to chase food or prey, interprets that spike as a life or death opportunity. Rational thought is drowned out by emotional urgency. And so, you chase, you FOMO buy at the top, you panic sell at the bottom, you refuse to wait for your edge. Not because you are foolish, but because your brain is ancient, and the market is modern. This is why the famous marshmallow experiment resonates so deeply with traders. In the 1960s, psychologist Walter Mischel placed children in a room and offered them a choice: one marshmallow now, or two if they could wait 15 minutes. Many children ate the marshmallow immediately. A few resisted, distracting themselves, turning away, singing to themselves, waiting patiently for the larger reward. Follow-up studies showed that those who waited tended to have more successful lives, higher achievement, better emotional control. The ability to delay gratification was predictive of resilience and discipline. Trading is nothing more than the marshmallow experiment repeated endlessly, with money as the marshmallow. Every chart is a test: will you take the small, immediate, unreliable win, or will you wait for the larger, consistent, proven opportunity? But unlike children, traders face an even harder challenge. The marshmallows of the market are not static. They move, vanish, reappear, multiply. The screen flickers with endless stimuli, each one promising reward. The test of patience is magnified 1,000 times. Neuroscience explains why every potential trade lights up the nucleus accumbens, the brain's reward center, releasing dopamine in anticipation of reward, not even the reward itself. The simple act of seeing a trade setup, even if poor, is enough to flood the brain with desire. The prefrontal cortex must fight an uphill battle to say no, to remind you of your plan, to enforce discipline. But the more tired you are, the more stressed you are, the less sleep you've had, the weaker the prefrontal cortex becomes, and the easier the limbic system hijacks control. This is why exhausted traders overtrade. This is why emotional traders chase. This is why patience feels impossible. And yet, patience is the greatest trading edge. The trader who waits for the fat pitch, who lets setups come to them, who treats inactivity as a position in itself, who is comfortable doing nothing. That trader survives while others are destroyed. Jesse Livermore again and again reminded readers that his greatest profits came not from buying or selling, but from waiting. Warren Buffett famously said that the stock market is a device for transferring money from the impatient to the patient. Neuroscience reveals the hidden truth. Patience is not just a personality trait, it is a neurological skill that can be trained, strengthened, rewired into the brain itself. The prefrontal cortex grows stronger with practice. Neuroplasticity means that every time you resist the urge to take a poor trade, you literally strengthen the neural circuits of self-control. Studies on delayed gratification show that people can improve dramatically with simple strategies: reframing the temptation, distracting attention, focusing on long-term goals. Children who turned the marshmallow into a game, pretending it was a cloud, a picture, not food, were able to wait longer. Traders can use similar tricks. You can reframe a chart that tempts you into a mental image of danger, not reward. You can distract yourself by stepping away from the desk, walking, breathing, resetting. You can focus not on the single trade, but on the larger journey. your consistency, your 30-day challenge, your yearly edge. Every small act of patience strengthens the circuits for the next one. Consider what happens in the brain when patience is exercised. The dorsolateral prefrontal cortex lights up, applying executive control over impulses. The anterior cingulate cortex monitors conflict, flagging the temptation and keeping awareness sharp. Over time, repeated practice increases gray matter density in these regions, making self-control more automatic. Just as lifting weights strengthens muscle fibers, resisting bad trades strengthens neural fibers. The trader becomes neurologically different, not just psychologically stronger. This is why routines, rules, and rituals matter. They are not mere habits, but literal rewiring of the brain toward discipline. But patience does not mean inactivity. This is a critical distinction. Neuroscience shows that boredom activates the default mode network of the brain, leading to wandering thoughts, impulsive decisions, and emotional reactivity. If you simply sit idly at the screen waiting, you risk boredom hijacking you into a rash move. The patient trader is not passive but actively engaged. They are watching, journaling, preparing, running simulations in the mind, but not executing until the right moment comes. Their patience is active, not lazy. Their mind is focused, not drifting. They are like a predator in the wild, coiled, alert, silent, waiting for the prey to step into the open. This is patience as strategy, not as avoidance. Examples from trading history show the devastating cost of impatience. Traders who blew up accounts often had winning systems, but could not resist the urge to trade outside them. They wanted action more than profit. They wanted stimulation more than survival. This is dopamine addiction disguised as ambition. Neuroscience experiments show that intermittent rewards, the type slot machines give, are the most addictive. Markets are slot machines in disguise, delivering random reinforcement that hooks the brain. The only antidote is patience, the conscious refusal to play every spin, the discipline to wait for true edges. Building patience can be trained systematically. Meditation enhances prefrontal control and lowers impulsivity. Visualization strengthens delayed gratification by rehearsing success. Breathing techniques calm the amygdala and reduce cortisol, buying the brain time to re-engage rational thought. Setting rules like only taking a maximum of 2 trades per day forces structural patience. Journaling mistakes builds awareness, turning unconscious impatience into conscious reflection. Over time, these methods carve new pathways in the brain, making patience less a struggle and more a state of being. And the rewards are extraordinary. A patient trader does not bleed from overtrading. A patient trader avoids revenge trades. A patient trader preserves capital while others destroy theirs. And perhaps most importantly, a patient trader experiences less stress, less regret, less emotional pain. Neuroscience proves that every impulsive act leaves behind not only financial loss, but chemical residue. Spikes of cortisol, crashes of dopamine, a roller coaster that exhausts the brain. Patience shields the trader from this storm, keeping emotions steady, brain chemistry balanced, performance sustainable. Ultimately, patience in trading is not about waiting longer. It is about aligning the brain with reality. Markets do not move on your schedule. They do not reward urgency. They do not care about your cravings. The market punishes the brain that demands immediacy and rewards the brain that accepts delay. The impatient brain is primitive. The patient brain is evolved. To succeed in trading is to evolve beyond instinct, to train the neural circuits of discipline, to rewire yourself into the kind of person who can look at the flashing marshmallow of immediate profit and calmly wait for the larger feast that comes only with time. And so, when you next sit before the charts, remember every temptation is a marshmallow, every hesitation is a battle of circuits, every moment of waiting is an act of neural training. Patience is not weakness. Patience is strength. It is not the absence of action, but the perfection of timing. It is not something you are born with, but something you build, one resisted trade at a time. And when patience becomes your edge, you stop being a slave to your brain and start becoming a master of the market. For in the end, the trader who waits is the trader who wins. Most traders imagine that their performance lies entirely in their charts, their strategies, their indicators. They obsess over setups, over entries and exits, over screens filled with endless data. Yet, hidden in plain sight, the true foundation of their trading success has nothing to do with candlesticks or price action. It begins in the body. The truth that neuroscience makes undeniable is simple. Brain performance is physical performance. Every decision, every calculation, every act of patience or discipline is carried on the fragile machinery of neurons and neurotransmitters. And those neurons are fueled, repaired, and sustained by sleep, diet, and exercise. Ignore these and you sabotage your trading before you even click buy or sell. Master them, and you give yourself an advantage that almost no one talks about, but that separates the amateurs from the professionals. Start with sleep. the most underrated trading tool in existence. Traders often pride themselves on grinding through long nights, watching markets across time zones, fueled by caffeine and adrenaline. They imagine this as discipline. In reality, it is self-destruction. Neuroscience proves that sleep is not optional. It is the process by which the brain consolidates memory, clears waste, resets emotions, and restores focus. When you learn a new chart pattern or review your trading journal, that knowledge does not cement itself in your brain instantly. It is during sleep, specifically during deep non-REM stages and REM cycles, that the hippocampus replays the day's experiences and transfers them into long-term storage in the cortex. Without sleep, patterns remain fragile, uninsured, easily forgotten. This is why traders who cut sleep repeat the same mistakes. They never consolidate the lessons. They are trapped in a cycle of forgetting, condemned to relive the same errors, not because they lack intelligence, but because they lack rest. But it goes deeper. Sleep also regulates the amygdala, the fear center of the brain. In sleep-deprived states, the amygdala becomes hyperreactive, responding to small losses with outsized fear, turning minor volatility into perceived catastrophe. At the same time, the prefrontal cortex, the rational brake on emotions, becomes weakened by fatigue. The result is the worst possible combination of fearful, overreactive brain with weakened control systems. No wonder tired traders panic, sell bottoms, and chase tops. Their brain chemistry is stacked against them. Add to this the buildup of adenosine, the neurotransmitter of fatigue, clogging neural firing, and the drop in dopamine balance, and you get a mind that is both foggy and impulsive. In such a state, discipline is almost impossible. This is not willpower failing. It is biology collapsing. Then there is diet, another neglected pillar of performance. The brain is an organ that consumes 20% of the body's energy despite being only 2% of its weight. Every thought, every calculation, every flash of pattern recognition is powered by glucose, amino acids, fatty acids, vitamins, and minerals. Yet traders feed themselves junk, processed foods, sugar spikes, caffeine overloads. The result is not only poor health but poor trading. Blood sugar crashes lead to mood swings, clouded thinking, impulsive decisions. Inflammation from poor diet disrupts neurotransmitter function and slows reaction times. The very fuel of thought becomes contaminated. Neuroscience shows how nutrition directly affects neurotransmitters. Serotonin, the mood stabilizer, is synthesized from tryptophan found in protein. Dopamine, the driver of motivation and focus, requires tyrosine and phenylalanine from lean meats, nuts, legumes. Acetylcholine, critical for memory and learning, is produced from choline-rich foods like eggs and fish. Omega-3 fatty acids from fish oils enhance synaptic plasticity, improving the brain's ability to form and strengthen neural circuits. Even simple hydration plays a role. Mild dehydration, as little as 1–2%, impairs attention and short-term memory. A trader who ignores nutrition is like a driver who pours dirt into a race car engine and wonders why it breaks down. The body is the fuel system of the brain, and the brain is the trading system of your life. Exercise, too, is more than physical health. It is a neurological amplifier. Aerobic exercise increases blood flow to the brain, delivering oxygen and nutrients, enhancing overall cognitive performance. But it does more than that. Exercise stimulates the release of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, often called miracle grow for the brain. BDNF promotes the growth of new synapses, strengthens existing ones, and enhances neuroplasticity. This means that traders who exercise are not just healthier. They are literally building a brain more capable of learning from mistakes, adapting to markets, and sustaining focus.